Good afternoon. My name's Al Byrne. I'm going to be real brief because we're supposed to be real brief, and I want to give you a little background of where I am, where I've been. My first brush with medical cannabis was the death of my father in 1967. Chemotherapy, the sickness, it relieved it. Skip forward. 1983, I'm married now to an ex-Navy nurse getting her master's degree at Case Western. She did her thesis on the medical use of cannabis and would patients tell doctors and nurses about their use. When we got the survey back, we were absolutely astounded. Keep in mind, this is 1983. Everybody knew about, hey, you use cannabis for glaucoma, you use cannabis for cancer sickness from chemotherapy, etc. But what we saw in these reports that were coming back to us through normal was Crohn's disease, sickle cell, headaches, morning sickness, etc. Nobody knew this at this point in time. So this survey done by Mary Lynn Mathery, who's my wife, probably the most famous nurse in the world with cannabis, turned us around. 1988, she joined the National Board of Normal, became the chairperson for the Normal's Committee on Cannabis and Health, which had luminaries on it like Lester Grinspoon and others of his ilk. 1989, Normal was broke. They brought me on board as a business manager consultant to see if we could pull them out. We did. Mary Lynn and I proudly say that Normal ran on our MasterCard for 2 years. Keith Stropp has thanked me personally many times for that since. I became the executive director of Normal. I ran Normal with another guy named Jim Turney from 1992 to 1994. He's the national secretary. We had a conference in 1990. My wife put together the first 5 patients that get the cannabis from the federal government, the NIDA program. You saw the University of Mississippi farm here, Jay Hong was showing here. It's crap. Boy, is that crap medicine. But we'll get beyond that. We put those people on a dais at a Normal conference, I believe it was 90. C-SPAN covered that thing. Normally at night, and Normal, we got about 300 phone calls a week. That week we got 40,000. We knew we were onto something. My wife and I, those 5 patients and some other medical professionals, then went on in 1995, April 1995. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary, and we formed Patients Out of Time. If you haven't heard of Patients Out of Time and studied what we've done, you should go home and immediately do that. Well, what we've done for the past 20 years is taught doctors and nurses, healthcare professionals, pharmacists, social workers, anybody that'll listen about the medical, therapeutic, clinical uses of cannabis in the endocannabinoid system. I came to a meeting of this group a year ago, and I asked everybody in the room to put up their hand if they've heard of the endocannabinoid system. Then we got a few hands, and then I said, okay, who can explain it to me? Nobody could. So I hope over the last year, I see there on the wall, I see, call it cannabis. It's cannabis. Marijuana is a slang term, it means nothing. Cannabis is an herb. You heard that from Jay Harnigan, or the herbal pharmacopoeia. It's an herb. It's like garlic. Treat it with dignity. It's cannabis. If you go to a medical dictionary, it's cannabis. Let me give you another tip. When everybody's going around and they're hitting the Google for medical marijuana, you're going to go off on a trip over here. But if you Google therapeutic cannabis, you go on a trip over there. So if you're going to learn about this stuff, start using the correct words. I'd like to give you another word I'd like you to start thinking about when you start talking to your politicians and your mother. And that's the word high. High is a negative. I don't think it should be, but it is. In our society, it means intoxicated, it means out of control, it means stupid, it means something bad. Don't use it. Don't use it. Don't use marijuana, don't use high. Dr. Greg Gerdeman, a noted PhD, studies cannabis in the brain, Eckerd College, Florida. We interviewed him, I don't know, a couple of months ago on a radio show we do, and he said, change it to joy. It's a great word. It's a great word. When I smoke cannabis, I get pleasure. I get joy. I don't get high. So don't use those words. Don't say marijuana, don't say high. Say joy, say cannabis. And then we'll get to where we are today in this world. I'm a retired Navy, by the way. I spent 24 years in the Navy. I joined when I was 17. I left when I was 41. I'm a Vietnam vet. I'm a cohort of Michael here, who's a 100% disabled Air Force vet. And we've done some work with the veterans nationally, and he'll tell you about it. I will tell you that I'm also the CEO of an organization out of Spokane, Washington, called Veterans for Compassionate Care. This is a for-profit company. This company intends to bring veterans into a healthcare facility, excuse me, just made a small mess, into a healthcare facility and treat these veterans who are way overdosed on pharmaceuticals, opiates, again, as you've heard earlier, and give them cannabis and reduce their pharmaceutical use. We believe we can reduce their pharmaceutical use within 30 days, at least in half, if not more than that. Now let me tell you about where you get some information. www.medicalcannabis.com. That's Patients Out of Time. 20 years. It's been up there. Your doctors and nurses, your social workers, and your pharmacists will have 2 links there where they can go online and get accredited cannabis information. Accredited. I mean, they take these courses, they get their continuing medical education credits, and they need it for the year or whatever. They need it. 2 links. One is to the University of California School of Medicine, San Francisco. Doctors can take a course there, cost them about $400 bucks, but they get 10, 12 CMEs. It's a bargain. Then go to themedicalcannabisinstitute.org. For 35 bucks, they get 1 CME. Now, all of these CMEs and all of these videos are produced by Patients Out of Time at an annual conference we do. It's an accredited conference. The next one will be May 21, 22, and 23, 2015, West Palm Beach, Florida. And what will happen is 600 or 700 healthcare professionals will show up. They'll get their accreditation for being there. It's a 2-day event. I say 3 because it gets technical. It's a 2-day event for the CMEs. We'll videotape it professionally. It goes back to the University School of Medicine, San Francisco. They bless the video. It goes online, and doctors can take it. Right now, the Medicalcannabisinstitute.org has accredited conference information going on in 6 languages to 17 different countries. Medical cannabis information is out there. Patients Out of Time holds a DVD with 100,000 pages of peer-reviewed science. Don't let anybody tell you there's not any science. There might not be much in the United States, but it is in the United States at the University of Indiana where they discovered the endocannabinoid system. It's at the University of Iowa right now where there's a guy that says if your family has Alzheimer's, someone in your family has Alzheimer's, 1 puff is enough. 1 puff is enough per day to halt Alzheimer's. This kind of information is out there. That's 4 years ago we heard that at one of our conferences, Gary went. You've got to get up on the information. I do not want you to go into Virginia and screw me up. You understand? I've been doing this a long time here. And I want you to use the right language. And I want you to, when you go in and you see these politicians and whoever the heck you're talking to, you do it right, you do it with class, use the right stuff, and you leave them something that shows them you're not full of shit. And they are. That's the bottom line on this. And if they say, it never happened, it did happen. The University of Virginia in 1994 hosted one of our conferences. And it was hosted by the University of Virginia School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and School of Law. Virginia knows this stuff is here. It's your politicians that don't know. And here's another thing I want you to remember, and I think I'm supposed to run out of time. I'm done? Am I done?
Yeah, go ahead. Give them the one thing.
Okay.
I'm not going to stop you now.
When you talk to these people about medicine, they don't have a clue about medicine. These guys are lawyers and cops. Do not let them prescribe medicine for you or me in this state. All we need to do in this state is to get doctors with balls, either sex, don't care, snap them on, girls, and let let's go and tell these politicians they've got to get out of the way. They've got to give up their power to the medical community that actually knows what they're talking about. Thank you for listening.
I don't make this thing. Okay. Hi everybody, Michael Crowitz, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. I'm also a fellow board member with John on the International Alliance for Cannabis as Medicine, and I'm a board of advisors of Patients at a Time. And I guess before I even go any further, I just want to mention I really like the boards that helped me kind of get caught up from yesterday. I'm sorry I missed it. But I'm really glad to be here today. This is a great crowd. I really appreciate Virginia Normal and everything that everybody's done to pull this together. This is really good. I really agree with everything. I didn't find anything I disagree with, actually, now that I think about that. The decrim, I really like the idea of getting together with the ACLU and working more closely with the ACLU. We've always had a good relationship with Virginia ACLU. We've never really worked closely on marijuana bills. They're always, oh, we got death penalty, this or that. Maybe finally they'll be willing to put marijuana on the front burner. That would be really great. And if you do any field trips to Colorado, I put my hand up. I want to volunteer to be on the advanced crew for Virginia Normal. Check out Colorado and understand, and fact-finding mission and bring back that information. It's a tough job, but I'll volunteer. I don't mind volunteering for that. So I go back a little ways with Virginia Normal. Very quickly, I probably said this story before, so I'll just recap, but I think it's worth mentioning that when I started, I was a volunteer with Virginia Tech Normal, which was, I think, pretty much the only active chapter in the 80s, and kind of picked up the reins from Virginia Normal, which became National Normal, is kind of how I understand the history of that. And then in that kind of absence, there was a couple of attempts to start Virginia Normal again. John Getman was the latest, and I came in to assist him. And when John Getman had to leave, he left it with me, and I brought in Ed to assist me, and left the reins to him, and he's done a lot with it, and I really didn't do much with it, so I don't claim much other than bring Ed in, I guess. So thanks everybody for all the great work that you've done. I work at the national level. I work with the VA, and in 2010 we were able to, and again this will be a refresher, but we were able to pass a medical marijuana policy inside the Veterans Affairs, inside the Veterans Health Administration.
Cannabis. Cannabis.
Cannabis, yes, medical marijuana policy, cannabis. Marijuana, we call ourselves Veterans for Medical Marijuana Access, or Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. In this venue, as I introduced myself as Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, if I was in a different venue, let's say the United States, National Narcotics Officers Association, I might actually introduce myself as a Veterans for Medical Marijuana Access. It just depends on the venue for me. And I think that you really should use those words effectively. In whatever way you use them, wherever you're using them, just think about it, how you're using those words. I don't automatically come in on one word or the other as Patients at a Time does. You see the different hats we wear, even an inch apart. So the Veterans Affairs policy makes it very clear that you're not to be punished inside the VA. So you're allowed to use cannabis under the state programs. However, they made it really, really, really crystal clear that the VA doctors were not allowed to recommend cannabis. So what that means is if you're a veteran, you have to leave the VA, go downtown, see another doctor, to start the whole pop thing up again with a whole new physical and everything else, and get your recommendation and comply with the state law. And then if you run into any issues at the VA hospital, that should immunize you from any of their drug testing program, anything like that. But the flip side of that, what's really become kind of a very good tool for us to use at the state level, and why I think it's so important to mention this, is because the VA won't allow the doctors to recommend, they've really put the football in the state hands, and they've kind of given the authority and the responsibility of treating veterans' issues, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, long-term neuropathic pain, phantom limb pain, et cetera, lots and lots of seizure disorders. I mean, you have a lot of things that you see commonly in the medical marijuana movement. You just see it at a greater percentage of the time, a greater occurrence rate with veterans. So these are the issues that are coming up inside the VA. And with the VA not able to do anything about it, the doctor's not able to talk about it, kind of a new don't ask, don't tell policy. He looks like a football coach over there, I love it. With it kind of don't ask, don't tell policy, it really behooves you to get the legislator to understand that. You know, the state legislator, it has been scared of the federal authority for a long time. This is a chance for you to kind of be together with the federal authority and come in and say, oh, we need your help. And that's really effective and helpful. So I want everybody to know, you know, I'm not ever going to get through all these questions, I can see that now, but I want everybody to know that I have hopes that we can actually come together. You know, I was thinking at home, how do I present this? You know, my hopes for us to work together on a bill and my experiences. Our previous couple of medical marijuana bills were mine, essentially. I worked with Delegate Griffith at the time. He's now Congressman Griffith, and we've got a new bill in Congress, but he's not at the state level anymore. We need to find a new champion. We're working on it. You're working on it. Everybody's working on it. It's important to understand a couple of things about that. One is that, you know, I worked for a very, very long time before that particular delegate was willing to talk about medical marijuana or work on it. And the second thing is that, what did I learn? Essentially, bills that we don't like will move on their own, and we have to stop them. I mean, that's most of our job, most of the time, is stopping bad bills from becoming law. And if you stop a bad bill from becoming law, I assure you it's 10,000 times easier than trying to stop, take a bad law and get rid of it and repeal it. So it's very much worth the effort. But that's what we do most of the time. And what we have to do here is get a good bill, something into the legislature that we like. To stop a bill, we only need 1 or 2 people there. And you'll probably see good bills that are maybe not what we would like now. This is a new breed of bill, like the CBD bill, which is CBD only. We don't agree with that. There's no medical authority yet that said that a CBD all by itself, the molecule, is better than using it in the whole plant preparations. So, you know, if we see a CBD bill, only CBD, it's not us. We didn't write that. That was, you know, some effort that a legislator picked up from a lobbyist, maybe from Charlotte's Web even, I don't know. So what I'm saying is those kind of bills will just move right through the legislature. We're not going to be there to oppose it. We're not necessarily going to be there to support it, and it'll just pass. If we want a bill of our own, we need to be there. We're going to have to push it. It's not going to move on its own. And we're not going to be there to stop it because we're not going to be against it. So we wound up in this situation where the movement was kind of tepidly in favor of these acts that Delegate Griffith put forward. And it really, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to move it over the mountain. And maybe we couldn't have gone over that mountain then. The mountain's shorter now. I'm really sure we can get over the mountain now. So, you know, we come up with whatever we come up with. I just encourage everyone to get on board with it and move with it. You know, whatever it is. I mean, just to try to get on the same page and support it, just, you know, support it like hell. So, it's interesting, you know, I was, just give you a little insight. This room reminds me of the rooms that, if we had a ballot initiative process, we would already be, well, we'd already have a new law. But if we had a ballot initiative process, we'd probably be talking about legalization right now in this room. And this would be a very tiny crowd, and sitting in the seat would be Kevin Sabet talking to the crowd. And I just thought I'd mention that. We don't see Kevin Sabet in the state. We don't see any opposition in the state because we're not close enough to the goal line. And we can take advantage of that, and we can work in that vacuum. It's a nice, quiet place to work, you know. And let me see, we have about a minute or?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll find the most cool thing. I'll try to.
Perfect. Everybody gets to ask you questions, so they can get you.
All right, I really encourage everybody to ask questions, especially if you have any questions about the VA policy or the history of the laws going back to the 70s even, you know, working up into the couple of bills that we put forward. Confidence in the future, hopes and dreams, current trends. I think that, you know, I wrote down a little note that I'm going to Twitter later, John, about the GW seeing cellulose as getting in the way. The plant matter isn't a nuisance. That was another quote that actually almost batted on from Dr. DuPont, who called the plant material problematic plant material. I don't feel that way. Cannabis is, you know, I'm not going to go into a whole gift from God thing, but it's a plant. And it's a beautiful thing, and just like roses or tomatoes or anything else, there's a variety that you find in nature that you just don't see reflected in the individual studies of the individual molecules. And that's what we're up against. It's a very clear fight. We've got a case out in California in the federal court right now. If you read all the transcripts and everything from it, we're in the fight between the single molecule and the plant. It's straight up, right? And the plant material is not in the way. And I think we're going to be just, so you know where my mind is at and where I think the future is, where that long goal off in the distance where we're aiming for is a place where cannabis is going to be actually treated a variety of different ways. There's going to be some damn strong medicines that you're going to want to keep out of the hands of everybody that doesn't have very, very good advice from somebody. And those are going to be very tightly controlled. And then you're going to have a bunch of herbal medicines that are going to be controlled just like any other herbal medicine. And herbal pharmacopoeia, why not? You got 100 medicines, why not have them under one umbrella? And you're going to have hemp, and you're going to have industrial products, including some medicines that will be drawn from that market as well. They're just figuring out that you could have 100 acres of hemp and get CBD medicine out of that. They're going to be looking towards that. They will, definitely. So, I mean, it's going to be handled a variety of different ways. It's going to be handled as a medicine, a herb, a food. Don't get it bogged down in a fight over if it's a herb, a medicine, a food, because at some point it will be treated as everything, a fuel, an herb, a medicine, a food, and all those get handled differently. So I encourage you not to get in a box, get caught up in that. So thanks everybody, and I really appreciate you all inviting me out here to speak, and I look forward to your questions.
I'm TJ Thompson, the chairperson for Safe Access Virginia, which we are the state chapter of Americans for Safe Access, which is the largest patient advocates group in the country. They were the ones that were very instrumental in the early stages of the California initiative, and they have helped build successful medical programs throughout the country. Safe Access Virginia, we solely focus on medical cannabis, and I will tell you about the wording. While we all want it to be called its proper name, I've been told in Richmond that they want it to be called marijuana if we want a bill. So that's kind of disheartening to me, but I'm willing to make certain concessions like that. So you might hear me actually use the words interchangeably because I have to on Capitol Hill in Virginia. And you might too in your lobbying. So medical cannabis, Americans for Safe Access, their national office is in Washington, D.C., and Malik and I were just sitting here discussing about how everybody's working together right now in D.C. because a lot of stuff has happened, and that's kind of what we're seeing in Virginia, is Virginia has to kind of mimic its neighboring legislation. So because Northern Nova, D.C., and Maryland, it all spills into each other. So you're going to see a lot of spillover. So Virginia has to address this. Now, medical cannabis is already legal in Maryland. Actually, it's been legal for quite a few years. They're just now getting the program set up. And DC, both of them just overcame extreme hurdles this past spring. And so we're going to start seeing a lot of neighboring medical cannabis. And so Virginia needs to step on board. And with that being said, we do have members of the House of Delegates and the Senate on board with medical cannabis law reform. And the leader is Dave Albo, and he is the chairman of the Courts of Justices Committee, which is probably the strongest committee in the Virginia House of Delegates. So if he doesn't like anything, it's not going to get passed. It's not going to become a law. I just received an email back from him, and thanks to Dick Kennedy, who is one of his constituents. Dick's been working on him for a long time, and finally he's coming around. It's not covering safe, legal access for all Virginia patients. It is a start. He said, I am looking at changing the word prescribe to refer, or whatever the magic buzzword is. Add seizure to the list. That is all I'm willing to do at this time. Apparently there are clinical trials going on right now dealing with medical marijuana, so the problem may eventually be solved by the FDA. Well, this goes up to one of the things that I like to carry in my meetings with legislators, and that's, actually didn't the VPA do it with MAPS? The study that was just released this summer, Drug Policy Alliance and the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, Rick Doblin, look him up if you don't know. If you're involved in any psychedelic law reform, you need to know who Rick Doblin is. But they released a study showing 4 decades of federal blocking of cannabis research. And that's the number one argument, is there isn't enough research. Well, there is enough research, as Jay Hahn pointed out to you earlier. And so we need to overcome these hurdles and let them know that everything is happening. However, the federal government's what's blocking us. So that's why, we need to still keep working on people like Delegate Albo. And this bill that is going to be introduced is going to be Delegate Albo and Delegate Hope, who also serves on the Courts of Justice Committee with Delegate Albo, but Delegate Hope is a Democrat. So it's a bipartisan effort, and it's what they believe will work for the General Assembly. And going back to, we don't have the ballot initiative in Virginia, so we have to accept what the power that lies in the General Assembly is willing to give us. The way that we do hold power is we can vote them in and out. So that's kind of where we stand on lobbying as far as medical cannabis goes. I think there are gonna be some other bills introduced. I've heard rumor about in the Senate, there's a senator interested in introducing a CBD-only bill that will actually take Virginia cannabis law backwards in time to pre-1979, so pre-Reagan administration. Which is when I guess, what was that, like the second wave of the war on drugs then? So it's going to take us backwards if we have CBD only legislation, because we actually do have a law. It's just we need to change the wording. And I know Al mentioned this is not Safe Access Virginia's stance, and our stance is always evolving on cannabis, like what the perfect law for the Commonwealth would be. But a very good suggestion that came from Al Byrne is you just drop the conditions and you change the word prescription recommendation. Therefore, you follow with what federal case law has proven in Conant v. Walters, that the word recommendation is there. Doctors not doing anything further than tell them, hey, it might work for you, and then the patient goes out and gets it however the patient gets it. Now, we would like to see regulations, as Jay Hahn pointed out in his PowerPoint presentation. We'd like to see regulations enacted because we're dealing with people's lives here. We don't want to cause more harm than good. And I was recently out in Colorado giving a workshop on medical cannabis and veterans issues, and I thought they were doing a pretty doggone good job there. With how everything was done. I was notified of proper dosing, of course, so this was also after a lot of the stuff. I was actually out there the day the rat campaign came out. I saw that all over the news that morning. But yeah, so what we need to do with the movement in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we need to build relationships, whether that's between organizations such as the NAACP, such as the Industrial Hemp Coalition, such as NORML, Safe Access Virginia, and even within the patient communities. There's cancer patients, there's epilepsy patients. I'm a veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder. So we need to build those relationships as well as with our legislative representatives. We need to share our stories, talking about things. That's the number one thing, is just talking about it, putting it in the open air. Education, we need to educate people and communicate. We just need to communicate to everyone what it is we want and tell them as patients and patient advocates our timeline, because our lives actually matter. When you legalize medical marijuana, suicide rates go down. It's proven. Veterans, dealing with veterans issues, that's an amazing statistic. Epilepsy is not just CBD, CBN only, it's whole plant medicine that actually works for the epilepsy, because you need to mitigate the stimulation of the brain as well as all of the neurological extremities that it interacts with to stop seizures. So anxiety can trigger a seizure. Well, you reduce anxiety, you still might have a seizure, but so you need different portions of the endocannabinoid system stimulated. Jay Hahn talked about endocannabinoid system deficiency, and that, that's a legitimate term. That's a real thing. And so, again, closing up, Safe Access Virginia, we're looking for medical cannabis access for all patients, not just one group. And, we're just coming off of the history that you heard coming down the table. So now I'm going to turn it over to Malik.
How are you guys doing this afternoon?
Great.
Good.
Awesome. My name is Dr. Malik Burnett. I am a medical physician, and I'm a policy manager in Washington, D.C. at the Drug Policy Alliance. Drug Policy Alliance, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, nation's leading organization combating the war on drugs. And right now, we are standing on the cusp of history in DC. We are 2 days before the November 4th election, where Initiative 71 is on the ballot to end criminal possession for marijuana once and for all in District of Columbia. And the reason why we've done this is because it actually covers a lot of the issues that we were talking about, or the previous panels were talking about. One, we couldn't have done it without a tremendous amount of collaboration from a whole host of different groups. The ACLU laid the foundation with their report last year on the war on marijuana, which kind of got the conversation going within the District of Columbia, particularly given the fact that 91% of all drug arrests in the District of Columbia are of African Americans. So that, the District of Columbia, unfortunately, is the birthplace of the war on drugs, and therefore it's been most egregiously implemented inside of DC. And so, studies like that from the ACLU kind of really got the City Council thinking about this sort of thing. We then, began building partnerships with the NAACP. They are now on board in support of Initiative 71. They also are on board for promoting legalization of marijuana through the tax and regulation system that will come after we vote successfully on Tuesday to take possession out of the criminal justice system. There's a whole host of community groups who we've worked with in order to get to this point. And this is what the power of collaboration can do. It can move the needle when everybody is getting on the same page. I personally use, when we were talking about the word cannabis versus marijuana, I use both interchangeably. When I'm talking about in medicine, talking to physicians, as a physician, I use cannabis. When I'm out talking in public, or if I'm on the news talking about the issue, I use marijuana. Why? Because that's what people understand. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you call it marijuana or cannabis, it's a plant, and people shouldn't go to jail for it. And so that's generally where our approach is. And now that we're about to enact this legislative change in the district, it becomes that much more incumbent upon you all here in Virginia to get legislative change done. And there's a lot of barriers in place in Virginia, given the fact that there's a lack of ballot initiative. But if you look at other places across the country, that doesn't, just because there's not a large-scale ballot initiative process, doesn't mean that change is not possible. For example, if you look in New Mexico, they are, moving their city councils, Albuquerque and Santa Fe, to decriminalize marijuana in those cities. I mean, there's liberal bastions within the state of Virginia, while the state has large swaths of it which are conservative and very much within the scope of the war on drugs mantra. There are places where people view this as a problematic policy, and being able to move even local legislators at the local level to be able to enact change there would be helpful, especially in the Fairfax-Dale City, Northern Virginia area. If you look at Brooklyn, for example, Brooklyn DA just said that he is not going to come out and prosecute any marijuana possession arrests in the city of, in the borough of Brooklyn. So if the DA isn't going to bring these cases to court, then that de-incentivizes the police from even arresting the people in the first place. So those are additional opportunities that you can look at to bring about change. In addition to the work at the legislature, I think what ultimately would be a perfect world would be where we could get something in the legislature that both expanded access for medical patients and had large-scale decriminalization elements or provisions within that bill. I know that there are people within both sides of the aisle who can resonate with what both criminal justice reform and then expanding access for patients, and being able to bring legislators who view this issue from whatever place they're coming from together to work on this bill is going to be incredibly important in Virginia. And then you can also use additional arguments. What what will become clear in the next year or two will be that there will be a tremendous amount of tax revenue which will be generated in the District of Columbia. And, you know, for those people who are, in addition to a tremendous amount of fiscal savings from police not actually enforcing marijuana laws, you know, we're about to save somewhere between $26 and $49 million annually in police stopping enforcing the marijuana laws in the District of Columbia. So for your fiscal conservatives in Virginia, that's a talking point that you can use with them to get them to say, hey, we're, you know, going to be more prudent with the way that we spend our money by not wasting it on, you know, enforcing marijuana laws, because clearly the laws aren't working. You know, marijuana use is continuing. Marijuana is definitely still in Virginia community. It's not like they're eradicating marijuana. It's not. These policies don't work. So, you know, when you ask them to sit down and you're like, you know, we're all talking about responsible government and what responsible government looks like, and, you know, limiting the growth of government, you know, you can talk about policies which don't work, which cost the Commonwealth a tremendous amount of money. That's a talking point that I'm sure that you'll get a whole bunch of conservative delegates to be able to resonate with. And so, you know, being able to talk about this issue, it's not a liberal or democratic issue. It's an issue that is about people. Ultimately, people shouldn't be going to jail for possession of marijuana, whether they're using it medically or recreationally. And, you know, as much as we can collaborate and work together and not get caught up in the petty differences around, you know, provisions in the bill, which is what has killed a lot of bills across the country. You know, the advocates all not agreeing on small provisions in the bill and ultimately being fractured. And, you know, the best way to defeat an enemy is to divide it against itself. So collaboration, I think, is key. You know, we're happy to be working on this issue anywhere where it's moving. You know, we absolutely, that's why I came down here to, you know, even though we're running the campaign up there, I felt it's important to come down and talk with you guys about this, because, you know, every place matters. And, you know, being able to put an end to prohibition of marijuana or prohibition of drugs generally is a goal that I think we all share. Because, you know, like I said before, prohibition doesn't work. And so I look forward to answering your questions, and I encourage you all to keep active on this and be willing to use all your resources to be able to put this fight to an end. Thank you so much.
Excellent.